This video is an exceptionally long time coming. It is a video I have been meaning to film pretty much since I started my channel, and it's probably the video that I've gotten the most requests to do because I will often reference this topic of hormonal birth control, fertility awareness, anything related to the menstrual cycle, acupuncture. For me, all of those things sort of loop together. And there's a narrative around it that dates back, for a while. It sort of acutely dates back to right around 2008, 2009, but even really before that. The reason I had put off doing this video is because it seemed very overwhelming to just sit down and just talk about a story related to this. Not that I'm very happy to share it. It's not anything like that. I just wanted it to be really comprehensive and easy to understand. And I still sometimes am like, can I really just sit here and blab and people will watch it and get something out of it? I don't know. I just sort of am on a whim today, sitting down to do this video. I have not a note in sight. I took no notes, no preparation for this video. I just want to sit down and basically tell you the story of my experience with hormonal birth control, where I'm at today, how I practice birth control, how I relate to my fertility, how acupuncture fits into all of that for me, and just kind of share my perspective. Obviously, as a disclaimer, I am not a doctor. This is not medical advice. This is just my perspective. It is also just my perspective. I am not one of those people that says everybody should do it this way or everybody should have acupuncture or nobody should be on hormonal birth control. It's such an individual choice, and it's a really complicated nexus of factors that goes into informing how you practice birth control or how you relate to your fertility. Because I've gotten so many requests, I just want to share where I'm at with all of that. If you are finding me not through my normal channel and you just were searching around on YouTube looking for hormonal birth control videos, welcome to my channel. My name is Mercedes, and I mostly make videos about eco beauty, eco luxury beauty, kind of alternative health and lifestyle stuff. So without further ado, why don't we see how much I can ramble and how long it takes me to tell this story. So the story begins I guess the story really begins when I started taking hormonal birth control. I was kind of in a lot of ways, typical American teenager, high schooler, college student. I first started taking birth control pills around the age of 18, I think was the first time, and I was prescribed orthotricycline. And at the time, that was just what everybody was doing. Every single girl I knew in high school and college was starting to take birth control pills, and it was kind of just what you did. Just by way of some backstory, I grew up in a pretty sexually, not really repressive, but just household, a household that didn't really talk about that kind of stuff. So it was just I had no real education about it beyond health class. I was just kind of making my own decisions about it, doing what my friends were doing, all of that kind of stuff. So I started taking orthotricycline when I was 18. And I was on and off birth control pills until I was probably 24 or 25. I would stop them for a while. My period would come back. I would do all of the I would often skip my period. You know how you can, if you don't take the sugar pills, then you just won't get a period. So all of that. I cringe in retrospect that I did all of this. But, and also in that time, I think I went from the orthotricycline regular pill to the orthotricycline low dosage pill, just because I seemed to do fine on both, and why not take a lower dose? I'm not really sure. I can't remember the different levels of estrogen, progesterone, whatever is in there. But I was on the low dose for a while. I did fine on that. That time is very not memorable. If you've been on the birth control pill, you don't really experience much PMS. Your periods are very light. It's kind of you're very, in my opinion now, very disconnected from your cycle and your body. So around 2005, 2006, I actually switched from the pill to the NuvaRing, literally for no reason other than one of my roommates at the time had switched to the NuvaRing and was gushing about how much she liked it. Because honestly, this is how I feel my experience, girls in their 20s, at least when I was in my 20s, that's how I learned about birth control and what different people were doing and stuff. So I started the NuvaRing. The thing that I remember noticing about it is that I had basically no period on it. Like mine was barely bleeding like 1 day a month. It was very strange. I was on that for about 1 or 2 years, I want to say. Then I went to graduate school and I had just gotten out of a relationship. I was like 27 or 28, I think. I can't really quite remember. And I decided to just stop taking birth control and wanted to see what my body would do. I was like starting, honestly, I think what was happening is my intuition was starting to be like, help, like, please stop doing this. So I stopped the NuvaRing and I did not have a period for in total about a year. Now, after my period didn't come for like 2 or 3 months, I actually went to the doctor. I went to like the student health center at the university that I was at. They kind of go through their normal battery of, you know, like, do you have PCOS? Probably not. Are you blah, 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 whatever. So I remember my nurse practitioner at the time gave me a progesterone pill to basically make your body have a period. And she was like, let's see if that like jumpstarts anything. Of course it didn't. So I think another 5 or 6 months went by. I didn't have a period. I was so distressed. Like I just remember at that time feeling so upset about it. I just felt so wrong and it felt like something was wrong. So I went back, still very distressed, and she was like, well, really the only thing we can do is you can go back on the pill so that you would start having a period again, or we can start doing an ultrasound to see if there's like anything going on. And neither of those were satisfying answers to me either. It just so happened that at the time I was very good friends with, and still am friends with, a woman who had a friend who I sort of knew. I knew of her. We had met before, like out and about. She was also in a PhD program at the same university that I was at, but she stopped after her master's degree to pursue acupuncture training. There's a pretty noteworthy acupuncture school in Massachusetts, the New England School of Acupuncture, and that's where she was getting her training. So it just so happened that that summer, my girlfriend was like, you know, this mutual friend of ours is finishing up acupuncture. And I was like starting to do my own research and had read a lot about how acupuncture can be great for the cycles. And actually, now I'm like remembering this little detail, before I had come to graduate school, I had spent a year, I took 3 years off actually between undergraduate and graduate school. And one of those years I was working part-time in an alternative health center. There were 2 acupuncturists on staff there, and one of them had a really, really thriving practice helping women who were undergoing in vitro, because they're actually at that time, and I think probably in the time since then, there's been a proliferation of rigorous clinical trials demonstrating the efficacy of acupuncture to help embryo implantation after in vitro. I knew that acupuncture was really helping these other women with their fertility treatments, so it was like the things were starting to click in my head. And I learned that this other friend of ours was just going to start practicing, so I contacted her. I was, again, very distressed, and she, you know, as luck would have it, was also specializing in sort of women's health and herbs and things like that. And she was like, I'm just starting to practice. Let's get started on your cycles right away. So that was how I found my acupuncturist, and I was so fortunate. It's kind of funny, like sitting here to tell this story, how all the stars like really kind of aligned to help me through that phase. But Rhode Island is one of the states that does bill insurance for acupuncture coverage. I think there's not many states that do. Massachusetts does as well, I think. Rhode Island, Florida, maybe Colorado, and maybe California. It could have expanded since then, but at the time, this was in like around like 2009, 2010. I started seeing this acupuncturist who is still my acupuncturist today, all of these years later. How many years has it been now? Almost 8 years I've been seeing her. So I went and saw her. I had no idea what to expect. I just sort of felt like I wanted to go that route before going sort of the expensive, invasive Western medical route. Basically, from her initial assessment, she said that I was very blood deficient, and I had been a vegetarian on and off with bouts of veganism from the age of like 13 or 14 through like my late 20s. Throw in like a whole host of other disordered eating behavior. I was raw vegan for a while. I was macrobiotic, like you name it, I tried it, and clearly my body was like having a lot of issues. From the get-go, she never like told me like you need to start eating meat, but it was something, maybe I'll bracket that and come back to that part in a minute, because it was, I think, a really important part of the whole process. But I started on weekly treatments with her, weekly acupuncture treatments. I didn't want to take any herbs initially. I was like very freaked out by herbs. 6 treatments later, I got my period. And it was a huge turning point for me, to be honest, to see how quickly my body responded to something like that. Like something sort of changed in me from that experience. And I continued to see this acupuncturist weekly the entire time that I was in graduate school, so through 2013, and I had my insurance pay for this. So weekly acupuncture, I was paying like a $10 copay. Totally blessed to have that, and I credit that with really kind of a huge, profound step in like my physical healing journey, I guess. I still see her today. I see her monthly now. I'll just drive down to Rhode Island and see her for kind of like a tune-up, checkup. For now, the state that I'm in now, sort of much more healed and regenerated, it's more like energy balancing and maintenance as opposed to like, you know, a lot of the acute work that I was doing with her in kind of the earlier stages. So my period came back after those 6 treatments, and then from there on out, it was just a process of really like rebuilding my system, because it really was depleted from many years of not eating animal products, having disordered eating behaviors, and I really kind of saw the impact that it had had on me. So I don't really mean this to be controversial or a slam against people that are vegetarians or vegans for ethical reasons, medical reasons, health reasons. I mean, my personal belief is that in the long term, it's not good for you. I think that it leads to depleted bodies and systems. I think that most human beings do need animal products, not like every day or not in obscene amounts, but I do think we need, not even just from like a nutritional standpoint, but from an energetic standpoint, I think animal products are really essential. I think maybe in sort of the later stages of, I don't know how to say this without sounding crazy, but in the later stages of ascension or enlightenment, maybe not as much when your sort of light body is more integrated. But for most people on the planet today, I don't really believe that that's the case. And so I think that your body will just sort of energetically and then physically start to deteriorate if you're not giving it proper fuel. I already feel like I'm gonna get a lot of like hate comments from that, but whatever. So, and when I started getting acupuncture, I didn't like jump into eating meat. It was like this whole psychological thing I had to go through. And like I said, my acupuncturist she is an amazing human, and I'm so fortunate to have found her and developed this sort of like healing relationship with her. She really is a very gifted healer. But what ended up happening is that after maybe 2 or 3 months of regular acupuncture, I started really craving meat. So it wasn't even so much, it was a psychological thing, but then it just started to become like a physical imperative. Like I was dreaming about burgers. It was very clear that my body needed stuff that I wasn't getting. So I remember actually I went to this restaurant that's actually no longer open in Providence, Rhode Island. It was La Lotterie or Farmstead. If anybody knows that restaurant, oh my God, it was so exceptionally amazing. And I had one of their grass-fed cheeseburgers, and it was like an orgasmically epic experience. It was so good. You know, from there on out, I just started this whole process of becoming more of a traditional foodist, and now I'm like pretty paleo, traditional foods, gluten-free, but that's kind of like the second chapter, all of the nutritional balancing that I've done with the medical intuitive that I work with now, and that's all happened just in the last year. So that's kind of like my experience with acupuncture. I have taken herbs in the past. In fact, I went through many years of taking herbs. I don't now. It's not advised by a medical intuitive to do that, but you know, I think as part of my healing process, I'm sure it was whatever. Yeah, and through all of my years with my acupuncturist, I've gotten to experience so many just like fascinating and really amazing healing modalities that are like accompany acupuncture. So things like burning moxa on particular acupuncture points is amazing. I loved that whole experience. Gua sha cupping, stationary cupping and sliding cupping, fire cupping. My acupuncturist has used tuning forks on me, which I love. And yeah, it's just been a really amazing part of my life to be able to have that to look forward to as an experience. So as you can imagine, during that process, once my period came back after all of that distress, I just knew that for me personally, I never wanted to put synthetic hormones in my body again. Around that time, I actually pulled a couple of books to show you that I was reading that also sort of like drove that point home. The first is Balance Your Hormones, Balance Your Life by Claudia Welch, who is, I believe she's trained in both traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda. And then this was very highly recommended by my acupuncturist, and I think I've recommended it on my channel before, Taking Charge of Your Fertility by Toni Weschler. So kind of my own embodied experience with not having my period and then having it come back, and reading things like this, I just sort of made this commitment that I never wanted to take hormones again. I was never even curious about an IUD. I just was like, I don't want to do it. And reading this really gave me the tools to be in charge of my fertility. So a very basic primer on this book is that it teaches you how to chart and track your ovulation to know when you're ovulating so that you can either avoid conception or conceive. So it can go both ways. But really what this book is about is getting to know your body on an exceptionally intimate level that we are not culturally taught to do anymore, at least in the United States. I don't believe that we are. I don't really honestly know what it's like in other parts of the world, but I have to imagine that there's not a lot of progressive cultures that are sort of honoring women's fertility in this way. I know that sounds sort of like red tent-ish, but I hope you know what I mean. I don't know, I think this should be like required high school health class reading to get to know your body in this way. I mean, so much of what I read in here was like mind-blowing. Like, I didn't know your cervix changes shape during your cycle. I didn't know like what the different discharges meant, you know, all of that kind of stuff. So this was like one of the most groundbreaking books I've ever read. A lot of people think that it's the rhythm method, which is slightly different in that with the rhythm method or like natural family planning, you basically just don't have sex during like the time around ovulation. But with fertility awareness method, you use a barrier method like condom or diaphragm or something like that. So that's like it's a technical difference, because I think with natural family planning, if I'm thinking about it or remembering correctly, it's that you can't actively prevent a pregnancy because it's rooted in like that religious dogma, so that like using a condom would be preventing pregnancy or something. I don't really know. Anyway, so basically all you need to do to practice fertility awareness method is to read this book, buy a thermometer. I actually pulled mine out to show. You take your temperature every single morning before you get up, like out of bed, to monitor your basal body temperature. Yeah, so you basically just plan your sexual activity and your method of contraception around when you are ovulating. One little caveat I would say is that I think that I had a lot more peace of mind doing this because the morning after pill, or Plan B, I don't actually know what the generic drug name is called, is available now without a prescription at pharmacies. So if you do happen to find yourself in a situation where you start to panic, it is an option. To be perfectly honest with you, I'm not sure that I would have been well equipped to practice this when I was younger, like in my early 20s, mid 20s. The reason I decided to take the leap and not go back on hormonal birth control is because I found myself in a situation where I said, well, if I do have an unplanned pregnancy, like I'm ready to move forward with that. I guess I will say now that this is what works for me. I don't think that it's the right method for everybody. Like I said, I think that it's very, very dictated by where you're at in your life, what the sort of trade-off cost benefit is for you. I'm trying to think of like the best way to phrase this. I think in an ideal world, women would not be taking synthetic hormones. And if you read this book, kind of really drives that point home, like what it's actually doing to your body on sort of the physical and energetic level, and how it might create problems down the line. And it's not ideal. That being said, I think that there's probably a lot of, to be honest, I tune out what a lot of other like green or eco bloggers say, or health bloggers or things like that. I just think that there's a lot of like dogma and misinformation out there, and like prescriptive one size fits all approaches. Like, to say no one should be taking synthetic hormones, I don't think is accurate or realistic. I think ideally we would all be hormonally healthy individuals who don't, need to take synthetic hormones. But the thing with hormonal birth control is that there's such a complicated, cultural and political rationale and implication behind it. So it really did contribute, I believe, culturally to women kind of owning their sexual freedom, in the 60s and 70s. And I think it was a really important cultural moment for women to be able to take a pill and not have to worry about getting pregnant. Was it necessarily the right direction from a purely physical health perspective? Maybe not. And that's not to say, I think a lot of women's bodies are very resilient, and there's plenty of women that they're on hormonal birth control, they get off, they get pregnant very easily. And then there's women that don't. I mean, everybody's so different, right? And the other thing that also bothers me about people that will say no one should be on hormonal birth control is that to be able to have a kind of the education and the resources to read these books and chart your ovulation. I mean, that's a luxury of social position, I believe, as a sociologist. If you are living in poverty and worrying about paying the electric bill, you're probably not going to track your ovulation. I mean, maybe you are, but those were actually a lot of the themes that I dealt with in my dissertation, not to get too academic, but with respect to food choices, I just think that most things in life are a function of your social class and your opportunity structure. So, I consider myself to be exceptionally privileged. I'm so fortunate that I have access to good medical care and education and the ability to choose to not take hormonal birth control. And I fully recognize that choice, and it's a personal choice, and it's, everyone is entitled to make their own personal choices. For me, it's not the right choice to take synthetic hormones. It just doesn't feel right to me on any level, physical, emotional, energetic, mental, none of it. But I'm leaving out the whole discussion too of women that have really significant hormonal, issues or imbalances, PCOS, things like that actually really do require synthetic hormone regulation. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's kind of like the argument where, now that breastfeeding has come back into fashion, there's a lot of the mommy shaming I feel that goes on, that if you don't breastfeed, you're doing your child a disservice, or if you don't have a vaginal birth, you're doing your child a disservice. Babies that go through the birth canal pick up better immunity or something like that. Yes, in an ideal world, right, we would all be having perfect vaginal births and breastfeeding our babies for a year, and life does not work that way. And thank God we have these medical interventions now and drugs to help people that perhaps would not have actually physically survived before we had these advances in medicine. So I am not opposed to any of that at all. Life is complicated. It never really goes the way that we want it to go. And I think all that you can do is make the best choice for you, in any given moment. So for some people, I think they don't really want to go through, the extra effort of doing this. I think it can seem sort of scary in the beginning. Once you get used to it, you just start to know the days when you're very fertile. The reason I love this too is because it's just really gets you in touch with your body. And that to me, through not having my period to going to acupuncture and now practicing this birth control method, it's just so profoundly changed how I experience my body, how I experience my cycle. This is gonna sound really weird probably to a lot of people, but I love having my period. I love my cycle. It's something that I feel very connected to. I really have a deep reverence and respect for my body in a way that I never used to. And I think it was all tied into this whole process of, as someone that I feel has had a history of a lot of embodied problems, for lack of a better word, and to come to the place where I am now, I just consider myself exceptionally fortunate. Yeah, so I think that that's my story. I was extremely candid. And I'm obviously not shy about talking about this stuff at all. I think that the fact that we don't really talk about it more culturally, I guess I have always had very good female friends that I can talk about this sort of thing with. I hope that this was somehow helpful to people that are, maybe feeling a same sort of intuitive push to not take hormonal birth control and are looking for other options. It's a complicated topic, but I think it's an important topic, and conversations that we should be having with ourselves, with our partners, with our friends, with like everybody, because it's such an essential thing, not even just on a physical level, but like I'm saying, I feel like on an energetic and emotional level, being more in touch with your cycle is just so related to, you know, your sexuality and sexual identity and all of that. They're just things that I feel have had been so repressed for a while. And I do sort of feel like they're starting to come more out in the open, and I think that that's a really good thing. So at this point, I'm just rambling. I will list these titles and authors in the description bar below, and I think that's all that I can think of. I'm sure I'm leaving stuff out, but I will very much look forward to conversing in the comments if you have any questions. You know, if anyone wants to have conversations about alternative perspectives, obviously let's please all be respectful of everybody's personal choices on these matters, because they really are just like exceedingly personal. I would welcome that in the comments. So thank you so much for watching. I guess I'll just see you guys in my next video. Bye.